And, or Chris, yes, good. Oh, thanks, John. Yeah, last week was amazing, I think, in so many ways. It felt like one of those weeks where just everything came to one date and we were like wrestling with stuff, we were inspired by stuff, we were challenged by stuff. I went to the evening service afterwards as well, and just having that slightly deeper place to just encounter God and worship was so amazing too. It was a phenomenal week. But I just want to just echo what John said so well, and to say we want to do this together. When we were praying before the service today, I was thinking about a story that I heard of a Catholic missionary went to Africa to the Maasai tribe and was sharing with them about Jesus. And after a little while, he said, okay, you're ready, you're good, you've done a good job. Like, you can all become Christians now if you want to. You, not yet, you need a little bit more work. You can come back later and you can come. And the leader of the tribe said, what are you thinking you're doing? He said, we are a community. We are in this together. Some of us are stronger, some of us are weaker. We'll carry each other. We will either all go together or we won't go at all. And as I was praying this morning, I just thought of that, and it just resonated, because I think John's absolutely right. We go together. We want to support each other. And if some of us are a little bit anxious or unsure about the future, then we want to get alongside you. It's okay to not feel like you know what's going to happen. If some of us are like super excited and we're like, hooray, we're leaving the cold building, then that's cool too. But you don't have to put that on other people as well. Like, we want to travel together and do it with faith and to do it with expectancy, because I really sincerely do believe that God has got us and that he is moving us to a better place. We just don't know what that looks like yet. I also believe God doesn't have grandchildren, that he speaks to each and every single one of us. And so it might well be that he speaks to you, or he opens a door through you. And so we want to go on this journey together and find where it is that he's leading us to, who it is that he wants us to be reaching out to next, and what all of this looks like. So thank you, and please do keep on connecting with us or any of the other leaders and letting us know what you feel God is saying. I want to wrap up today our series on Jonah, and I want to warn you that this is going to be deeply unsatisfying for all of us. Does anybody have a friend who's terrible at telling stories? And it's like they'll start to tell a story and then they'll just kind of fade out, and you'll be like, that's not how stories work. Like, there has to be a point. There has to be an end. Like, it has to go somewhere. It's a little bit like that film. Has anyone seen No Country for Old Men? It just kind of exists and doesn't finish. And you're like, wait, that's it? Well, that's not how this is supposed to end. There's supposed to be a conclusion. And we're going to find that when we read the book of Jonah. It kind of gets to the end. And it would be amazing if it finished at chapter 3. End of chapter 3 is fantastic. Like, we had chapter 1 where God calls Jonah, and Jonah's like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. I'm going to go in the opposite direction. And we talked about how when you want to walk in the opposite direction to God, the devil will always offer you a ride. We then got to like chapter 2, where he has been like, he's sunk to the bottom of the sea. He's caused carnage and chaos for everyone around him. And he gets swallowed by a whale. And Emma shared amazingly about how problems can actually be platforms. That sometimes something that we think looks big, bad, and scary actually repositions you for where God wants you to be and where He's leading you to be going. And then chapter 3 we got to, where Jonah does, like, for me, the worst sermon you would ever hear. He basically, like, reluctantly goes into Nineveh and he's like, you guys suck, and in a month you're all going to be dead unless you repent. And then they do. I was like, wait, what is happening? And he leads this entire city to turn around. And I don't know about you, but if I had just preached and then the whole of Stockport had repented, I would be throwing a party. I'd be cracking open the Schlur. I'd be bringing out the Ferrero Rocher. I'd have been like, this is the top-notch, top-tier party. I would be singing, I'd be dancing, or maybe not dancing. Like, I'd be singing, I'd be high-fiving, I'd be like chest pumping, all of that stuff. I'd be like, this is the best day ever. And Jonah does none of those things. This is what it says Jonah did. So chapter 4, you can read along in your Bible. I put it on the screen. Verse 1, it says this. It says something different on the screen. This change of plans greatly upset Jonah, and he became very angry. So he complained to the Lord about it. Didn't I say before I left home that you would do this, Lord? This is why I ran to Tarshish. I knew that you were a merciful and compassionate God, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love. You're eager to turn back from destroying people. Just kill me now, Lord. I would rather be dead than alive if what I predicted will not happen. Just kill me, Lord, if you're going to be good. Just kill me, Lord, if you're going to be compassionate and forgiving and graceful. And it says that he got angry, and the word angry doesn't even really do this justice. This is like when you have lost all rational control of your actions. Like, have you ever had a moment where you've just been so angry you did something, you're like, I know I am shaming myself, and I will look back on this moment, but right now, I don't care. Food is going everywhere. Like, have you ever had one of those angry moments? I had one at Christmas. I just got so upset. I kicked a box of candles and it went everywhere. And I was just like, I don't even care. I'm so angry. Have you ever had that? This is what it's talking about. This kind of red-faced rage, no longer thinking rationally, toys being thrown completely out of the pram. He was livid. He was furious. There is something wrong with Jonah. There is something beneath the surface that is not right. And what's fascinating to me is on the outside, his ministry is so fruitful. Like, God is using him in such amazing ways. And it's entirely possible that you can have these highlight moments in your life. In fact, I think if you have been following Jesus for a little while, you probably experienced this, where God has done something amazing. You've had the breakthrough. Prayers have been answered. The healing came. The door was opened. And instead of feeling amazing, you suddenly find yourself feeling empty, feeling lost, feeling blue and down and heavy. You see, success does not immunize you from emptiness. Answered prayers doesn't mean that your life is suddenly going to feel full all the time. What happens outside of you doesn't change what is happening deep inside of you. And I think that so often I see people who have this. They take that step of faith and they feel worse. They get baptized and they think all of a sudden it's going to be like walking with Jesus every day for the rest of their life. And it doesn't happen. And it doesn't work like that. And I think that a lot of us, we can find ourselves trying to follow Jesus, but feeling like Jonah. And we just want to experience something different. And God looks at Jonah and he says, is this right? Like, are you right to feel angry? Like, what's going on here, Jonah? What is wrong? And I think that this is actually a beautiful story and a beautiful moment, because Jonah has spent his ministry serving other people. He has spent his ministry trying to help people and trying to do the right thing. And sometimes he's done it with a good attitude, sometimes less so. But this is the moment then God says, let's look at what's happening in you. Your focus has been on helping everybody else. But today, what's going on inside you? What's in your heart? What's in your deepest places? Let's deal with that. Something is off with him. And I think, and this would be my first point if you're a note taker, I would say the first thing is this, that it's easy to do the right things, but to do them with the wrong motives. It's easy to do the will of God, but not with the heart of God. That you can do things that look good and that look amazing to everybody else around you, and yet there can be something deep inside you that can be wrong. I remember a number of years ago, there was this guy called Mike Guglielmucci, whose name should mean that you remember him regardless. But he had this amazing testimony that he had terminal cancer. And he wrote a song called Healer. And it goes, I believe you're a healer. I believe you're everything. And he sung with such faith and such conviction. And I never forget seeing him on the stage. And he was standing there with like this air canister and this mask that went into his nose. And it was so powerful. And there were so many people who had faith because of that song, because of that testimony. And then all of a sudden the news came out that he lied, that he never had cancer, that it wasn't true. And I remember right then going, what is happening? And we talked about it. We were like, can we still sing this song? Can we still believe that God will heal us through this music? Or do we have to now say that that is taboo and that is broken to us? Maybe you've not had something like that. Maybe you've known a church leader and they've been like a source of inspiration to you. And they've preached and it's helped you and it's inspired you. And then all of a sudden the news breaks and they've had an affair or a series of affairs. Or they've been mismanaging money or done something deeply, deeply wrong. And you feel that brokenness and that pain and you're like, oh, but he helped me. And it was fruitful and it was good and God used it. Like, what is going on? How can God use broken people? And maybe you then question, can I still listen to their sermons or is he dead to me? What do I do? And this isn't even a new problem. This is a problem that has gone through generations and centuries of church history. And around the year 300 AD, there was great persecution on the church. And they started to be attacked from all different kinds of sides. And there became this dilemma. What the emperor in Rome said at the time was that all Christian books needed to be brought together and burnt. It was like, Christianity is illegal. We're going to close churches and burn all of your Bibles. And those who came and gave their Bibles in were given the term, I wrote it down so I get it right, traditores. They were traditores, which is where we get the word traitor from. They said that they betrayed God, they betrayed their faith, they were traditores. And so there became this dilemma in the church. Do we burn our books or do we get persecuted? Do we risk being killed for our faith? And some people said, do you know what, just take the books. And other people said no. Years later, after persecution finished, this was the question that happened. What do we do with the traditores? Can they still lead in the church when they've turned their back on God? Can they still lead when they have made such obvious public mistakes? And there became this massive argument and a massive debate. The Donatists were headed up by Jonah. No, they weren't. The Donatists believed that we couldn't forgive them, that they had turned their back and that they should be dead to us. And then this other group called the Catholics, not the Catholics like you think about Catholics, it just meant universal. They believed that there was forgiveness for everybody. And finally, this pillar of faith, a guy called Augustine came and he said, look, if we only allow people to minister who are perfect, who among us can serve God? He said, every single one of us is broken. Every single one of us is flawed. God's grace is sufficient. God can redeem and restore anybody. And so, can God use broken people? Yes. Can God do amazing things through people with the wrong heart? Absolutely. Do you need to have to be entirely restored and perfect for God to do something wonderful through you? No, you do not. Is there hope for everybody, no matter what you've done, no matter how far you've fallen? Yes, I absolutely believe that there is. Just like Jonah, God will use us even if our hearts aren't perfect and even if our hearts aren't entirely right. But the story doesn't finish there. In verse 5, it says this. It says, Jonah had gone out and sat down at a place to the east side of the city. And he made a shelter to sit under as he waited to see what would happen to the city. He goes east. East isn't back home. It isn't back to Jerusalem where he came from. It's in the opposite direction again. And all through the Bible, whenever someone goes east, it always symbolizes towards shame, towards distance, and away from God. In Genesis 3, because of Adam's sin, Adam sent Adam out of the garden to the east. In chapter 4, Cain left God's presence and lived in the land of Nod to the east of Eden. Genesis 13, when Abram and Lot parted, Lot went east to Sodom. Each time, Ezekiel 8, with their backs to the temple of the Lord, men faced east and worshipped the sun. See, Jonah, he goes east, away from the presence of God, away from where he was meant to be, and he sits there and makes a camp, and he says, I'm waiting, Lord. When will your judgment fall on these people? He believed in God, he was a prophet of God, and yet something in his heart did not represent God. You see, here's the thing. You cannot be perfect on the inside, and God will still use you. You can be fruitful in your life and be broken on the inside, but your life will always follow your heart, not your fruit. Your life will always follow your deepest places. You cannot fake this. You cannot cheat what is at the deepest parts of you. Proverbs 23 famously says this, above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. There is nothing more important about you than what is in your deepest places. It isn't the rooms that you walk in. It isn't the situations that you find yourselves in. It's not the disappointment. It's not the words that people speak into you. It is what is already inside you that echoes them. It's a little bit like if you've ever had a broken compass and it can just be 1 degree off. But you follow it and you follow it and you won't get to the destination that you're meant to get to. I say this all the time. My biggest concern for us as a church is not that we're going to do something dramatically evil. Like, I don't look at you and think, oh, I'm so worried that Jenny's going to go on a killing spree and go and murder people. I'm not worried about that. I think for most of us, the danger is when we find ourselves just 1% off. And every decision we make is just to the side. It seems good and it seems right, but there's something off about it. And then over time, you find yourselves 100 miles away from where you were meant to get to. Why? Because we are following our hearts. We are guided by the deepest parts inside of us. When you've been disappointed, more than anything else, guard your heart. When a friend has betrayed you, guard your heart. When you have big hopes and big dreams, guard your heart. When you see success and God does something amazing, guard your heart. We've got some close friends and they always tell us when something bad happens, they're like, pray against shock and trauma. What they're really saying is guard your heart. Because in moments of difficulty, in moments of stress, in moments of burden, you can change the trajectory of your life because your heart gets hurt. And you end up following a broken heart. Our hearts will shape the world around us that we live in. Guard your heart. There's another verse in 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. It says this. God says to Samuel, don't look on their appearance or the height of his stature, because I've rejected him. For the Lord does not look as people look. They look on the outside. The Lord looks at your heart. You could be doing all the right things. You could be turning up to church every single Sunday. You can be in a small group. You can be serving on team. You can be preaching in front of a crowd. But God doesn't look at what other people look at. He doesn't judge you on those standards. God's looking at our hearts because our hearts are what matter the most. He's not calling you to be successful. He's calling you to be fruitful. He wants you to be faithful. He wants your heart to be healthy and holy. What's going on in your heart's desires? I was listening to a talk this week, and it was about how we shape the world around us and how we all have these different battles and struggles inside of us. And the guy basically said that there's 5 things that every single one of us longs for, and that it affects the way that we live our lives. And for Jonah, he definitely longed for number 1. He longed for control. He wanted to make all the decisions. He wanted God to serve him. He wanted God to do what he wanted to do. And maybe you're a little bit like this. You just have to be in control all the time. You're happy as long as everything is going your way, and we have this battle to dominate and control the world around you. The second one, maybe, is perfection. And I'll be honest, I have times when I wrestle with this. I just recently made a desk in the corner of my dining room and some oak shelves about it. And every time someone comes around our house, Emma, my wife, grabs them and says, come and have a look at what Ben built. And every single time I'm like, no, please don't show them. Don't let them see it, because look at that cut. It's about obviously 5 millimeters off, and it's shameful. And can you not see where I have put far too much filler down the side? And there's something inside of me that's like, don't let them see it, because then they'll judge me. And they'll know that I'm not the best carpenter in the world, even though I want people to think I am. I'm not perfect. And I just want people to think that maybe you have this as well. You need things to be perfect. Otherwise, you're dissatisfied. Maybe it's the third one that you resonate with. You always need to have the answer. You need to be the person who has the answer to every single problem. And so when you're talking with somebody and they're telling you all the things that are wrong, you're chomping at the bit. You're like, yeah, but let me tell you the solution, because you always have to have the final say. And you need to know it's okay for there to be a conversation that doesn't finish with you resolving it. It's okay for you to not know the answer. It's okay for them to just tell you. And for you not to be the solution to every problem. You don't always need to know the answer. Some of us have control problems. Some of us it's perfection. Some it's having the answer. Some of us it's being there for people. We need to be needed. And these are people that we love, right? Because they're the kind of people who at a party are like, would you like a cake? I brought extra scones. Would you like a cup of tea? How can I help you? And it can look amazing on the outside, but a lot of the time beneath the surface, it comes from an insecurity. This need to be at the center, this need to be noticed, this need to be important. And so you find yourself in this position all the time. And it's not really about them, it's about you. It's about this insecurity, this anxiety that you hold beneath the surface. Or the fifth one that he raised was approval. You need other people's approval. You're always worried, what did they think? What are they thinking about me even right now as I'm talking? And you're reading their faces and you're trying to read their emotions. And you do something amazing. You do something really good. You do something that was really hard. And then you walk away and you're like, but what did they think about it? And the trouble is, you can never know. You realize that? If you're the kind of person who always needs approval from others, you can never really know what they're thinking. Secondly, you don't really have the right to know. What someone's thinking is entirely their thoughts, and they're allowed to have their own thoughts. Their thoughts don't always have to be to validate you. And if your confidence and your security is in what other people think of you, then you will always find yourself feeling insecure, feeling anxious beneath the surface. I remember I've talked about this all the time. I remember when I first started preaching, and every single time I finished, I'd sit down and it would be my first thought, well, that was rubbish. You wasted everyone's time today, didn't you? What a load of nonsense that was. It would be better if they just watched the video and I'd done with it. And I'd be looking around the room and I'd be trying to think, did that help you? What are you thinking about me? And it would knock me for six. Me and Emma, we used to call them Blue Sundays because that was it. The Sunday was written off. Because I have no power over what you think. I have no power to transform you. I can only do what I believe God is calling me to do. And the trouble with all of these different ways that we feel broken is that we don't just keep them to ourselves. We share them with the people around us. They affect and infect the atmosphere that we walk into. And this is what's happening with Jonah. He has this desire to control. And he just cannot handle that God is not going to do what he wants him to do. And everything falls apart. And so God, he starts to play with Jonah. And I think that he does it with some love, but maybe also with a little bit of prodding. It says that the Lord arranged a leafy plant to grow, and it spread its leaves above his head, shading him from the sun. and this eased his discomfort, and Jonah was grateful for the plant. So one minute he's mad, the next minute he's like, thank you, I've got leaves, and now he's chill and he's happy. He's ecstatic, he's buzzing. And then verse 7, at dawn the next day, God provided a worm, which chewed the plant so that it withered. And when the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. Jonah wanted to die and said, it would be better for me to die than to live. Have you noticed whether he's doing well or whether he's doing badly, it's all about him. It's all about him. The soundtrack of his life is me, 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 me. The soundtrack of his life is, I want this to happen. I want you to do that. I need this experience. And so many of us, we walk into the room and it's all about us. Week 1, when we first started speaking about this story, do you remember what we said if you were here? We said that there's one hero in the book of Jonah, and it's not Jonah. You see, Jonah was invited into God's story. God is the main character here. He is the one that is working with his creation and his people. And Jonah misunderstood his role. He misunderstood what his place was. He thought it was all about him being needed. He thought it was all about him having the perfect word to be said in any given moment. He thought that it was all about him being perfect and being worshipped by other people. Maybe it wasn't about him at all. You see, the problem with these desires that we have inside of us is that they can never be fulfilled. You realize that. You can never be in control. You can never have it all together. You can never have every bit of wisdom. You can never have everyone's approval all the time. It's impossible. These are all traits that only God has. It is God's job to be perfect, not ours. He is the one who is all faithful. He is the one who is all perfect and all present and all good and all kind. He is the one who is all knowing, and he is the one who has all wisdom. And the challenge is that we can be doing amazing things on the outside. And just like Jonah on the inside, it's all about us. It is all about our lives. And it is all about making this about ourselves. And God says, you've been such a blessing. You've done so much to other people. Let's deal with this. Let's look inside, because your deepest places will become what shape the world around you. Let's just quickly finish. Verse 9, God said to Jonah, I'll read this one. Is it right for you to be angry because the plant died? Yes, replied Jonah, even angry enough to die. Very dramatic. Let's keep going. Then the Lord said, you feel sorry about the plant, though you did nothing to put it there. It came quickly and died quickly. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all the animals. Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city? Even all the animals, and then the story finishes. No resolution. No idea what Jonah says next. Does he die? I don't know. Does he say sorry? I don't know. Does he turn around and go back to Nineveh and say, you are God's creation and he loves you? I don't know. We have no idea what happened. It is deeply frustrating for me. I wish that somebody would write a Jonah chapter 5 and that we could have a happily ever after. I would be satisfied. But I think that it finishes like this on purpose, because the whole book of Jonah is a question that God is asking of us. What is your life about? Who is the lead character in your life? And does God's heart for this creation and this world not shape us and change us and challenge us and inspire us? You see, Jonah knew who God was. God is good and compassionate. He's slow to anger. He is abounding in mercy and love. And this is how he looks at us. He looks at you with love. He looks at you with compassion. He looks at you with mercy. And Jonah doesn't realize it, I don't think, but the very same God who shows grace and mercy to Nineveh is looking at Jonah and saying, I want to show you that grace. I want to show you that mercy. I want to protect you from where your life is leading you to. Because what's the deepest inside of you, what exists at your center, will shape the direction of everywhere that you go. So I'm going to invite the band up. And I guess I just want to finish with the obvious question, which is what's going on in your heart? Really? On your worst day, what's going on in your heart? When your 3-year-old daughter was up at 3 a.m. causing carnage, what's going on in your heart? When you have a tough day at work, what's going on in your heart? When it feels like you're in a place of stability and you've got this amazing building and then God says like, you're going to be going somewhere new. What's going on in your heart? When you get that diagnosis that you dreaded and it just looks like the worst thing possible is coming up, what's going on in your heart? When you're serving others, when you're doing your best, when you're turning up and you're looking around and you're like, no one else is even helping, what's going on in your heart? You see, there is nothing more important than what's at the center of you. You're like a tea bag. It doesn't stay there. Temperature rises, it changes everything around you. I just want to give